Okay, so we've done open or unknown conditionals within an indirect statement. We're now going to do closed or remote conditionals. So whereas the open and unknown ones had the potential to happen, closed or remote conditionals are ones that are either very unlikely to happen or they're conditions that haven't happened. So you're basically talking about what would have happened if things were different from reality. The nice thing about future remote conditionals, so things that are unlikely to happen in the future, is that they look the same as future open conditionals, as we met earlier on. Obviously, that means when you meet them in Latin, you're not sure whether you're looking at a future open or a future remote. But if you think about it, they're very similar in meaning because both of them express something that might happen in the future. The open one is more plausible. The remote one is less likely to happen. Just translate it as whatever makes logical sense. When we come to closed conditionals, things start to get a little bit more complicated. So these are things that haven't happened in the present or the past. Okay, the protasis is the pluperfect or the imperfect subjunctive, and the apodosis is still an indirect statement, so it's still an accusative and infinitive. But instead of a normal infinitive, we have this weird periphrastic infinitive, which is fuisse, so to have been, plus the future participle. So this infinitive on its own would literally be translated as to have been going to do something. When you think about the fact that these are closed conditionals, that kind of makes sense because it's this idea of something that would have happened but didn't, which is why you have to use this weird infinitive. It's strange, but also it's quite easy to spot. So when you see it, you know that you're looking at a closed conditional, which is quite nice. The other thing, which is weird about closed conditions, is even if, this is the final point here, even if the verb is primary, so say we've got he says at the start, the subjunctive will stay pluperfect or imperfect. The reason for that is because these are closed conditions. They are things that do not have the potential to happen. So we couldn't use a present subjunctive for them because that suggests that they're possible. There's a condition in which these things might happen. Okay, the examples then that are given on page 93 are these two. So we'll just have a little look at them and hope that this makes things make a bit more sense. Okay, so remember that a present closed conditional originally would have used the imperfect subjunctive. So it makes sense in this first one that the imperfect subjunctive shows up. So we start off with, he said that the boy. So that's part of the indirect statement. We've got our infinitive here at the end, eratorum fuisse. Okay, now that is the to have been about to something. So in nice English, he said that the boy would be making a mistake if he were doing this. And that were makes sense here because when we had the imperfect subjunctive in a closed condition, to express something that is happening in the present, we would use the imperfect subjunctive. You know to translate it as would be making a mistake because it's this weird periphrastic infinitive. Okay, and rather than it being would have been making a mistake, we know that from the faceret, from the imperfect subjunctive that tells us that originally this would have been a present closed condition. Okay, if that doesn't make sense, just compare it to the next example. So he said that the boy. Now, we've got the same infinitive here, but fekisset tells us that this is a past closed condition rather than a present closed condition. So he said that the boy would have made a mistake si hoc fekisset if he had done this. So in the original closed condition, we would have had two pluperfect subjunctives, and this would be describing a past closed condition. So remember, there's that weird stuff going on with these closed conditionals where the tense of the subjunctive is essentially a tense further back from the tense of its meaning. Okay, and again, just like with the open or unknown conditionals, in order to translate the infinitive correctly, you have to look at the subjunctive. So if you have this weird periphrastic, you know it's closed. If it's imperfect subjunctive, you know that it's would be making a mistake. If it's joined with a pluperfect subjunctive, you know you're translating the infinitive as would have made a mistake. Okay, so it's not the infinitive itself that changes the tense of its translation, but the subjunctive that it's paired with. And the main thing that tells you that these are closed is that periphrastic, because it's included there. It wouldn't be included if it was an open or unknown conditional. Okay, the other little annoying bit of grammar, just to add on, because Latin never keeps things as simple as they could be. If you don't have a future participle, or you need your conditional to be passive, then you use futurum fuisse. Okay, so it's the impersonal neuter periphrastic infinitive, and then you use ut, and then you have a subjunctive. If you're using this because you want it to be passive, obviously you then use a passive subjunctive. If you're using this because there's no future participle of the verb, you then use an active subjunctive. And just like before, when we had when we used futurum esse ut and fore ut in place of a future passive infinitive, when we were learning about the indirect statement earlier on, it is tense by sequence. So obviously if it's historic, it needs to stay historic, and if it's primary, then it needs to be a primary tense. Okay, so no surprises. I'm just going to do exactly the same as I did with the open or unknown. So 328 on page 94, you guys are in charge of that. Right now, I'm going to go through exercise 329, so some English into Latin. Again, if you want a challenge, have a go at them yourself before you play the rest of this video. But if your head is totally mushed, which is understandable because this stuff is strange, then just follow the exercise through and see if it starts to make a bit more sense the way it's kind of structured. Okay, so exercise 329 then. So we've got some lovely English sentences here that we're going to put into Latin. Okay, so we'll start off with the easy bit. The old man said, Senex dixit. That he, remember, say always refers back to the original doer of the verb. Now, he would be helping if he were able. So let's get rid of the if he were able bit first. Okay, now, before we think about that, we need to figure out the whole setup of this sentence, the tense, what it is, okay? So this is a closed condition because the suggestion is that this man, because he's old, cannot help. So it's closed, it's not happening. So we have a choice between past or present. It's not in the past. He's saying right now I would be helping if I were able. So therefore we need the imperfect subjunctive rather than the pluperfect subjunctive. So si posset is the imperfect. So if he were able, he would be helping. Adjutorum is the future participle of adjuvo, and then fuisse. Okay. Number 2. The slave said he would have come if I had shouted. Closed conditional. The suggestion here is that he didn't come, but it's in the past. He would have come if I had shouted. So, servus dixit, that he, say, if I had shouted, so in the past, so we need a pluperfect subjunctive this time, clamavissem, would have come, venturum is the future participle of venio, fuisse. Okay, number 3. The woman replied that if she were to see the ship, she would tell us. Now, we need to think about this one because this is not closed. There is a potential that she could see the ship. So what this means is this is either a future remote conditional, so she probably isn't going to see the ship, but there's a potential for it, or this could actually be an open condition. It's totally believable that she can see this ship. The sentence doesn't tell us how likely it is. But remember that the open conditionals and the future remote conditionals will look exactly the same in Latin. So you can go back to your notes on the open conditionals and use that information there. So, femina respondit, and it's her, isn't it? So another say that she, if she were to see the ship. Okay. So this is a remote or open conditional. Now we've got to establish, firstly, it's historic because she replied. So that means we need either a pluperfect subjunctive or an imperfect subjunctive. And the only way that we can decide between them is to establish whether the potential action, the if clause, would be completed or if it's incomplete and ongoing. If she were to see the ship, she would tell us. She has to see that ship before she tells them. So therefore, it's a completed action. So although it maybe doesn't look like it in the English, we then have to use the pluperfect in the Latin to show that it's a completed action. Because if you think about this happening not as an indirect statement, you would say in Latin, if she will have seen the ship, she will tell us. So you'd use that future perfect. What happens to a future perfect when it goes into a historic conditional? It becomes pluperfect. Okay, so si navem vidisset then. So you can see here, if you look at it the other way around, you'd see this vidisset, think pluperfect, but you're not translating it as she had. You're translating it as if she saw the ship or if she were to see the ship. Okay, so then she would tell us nobis dictoram, because she's a woman, essay. Okay, number 4, I believe I would have made a mistake if I had gone back to Rome. So I believe that I, so the accusative of I is may, would have made a mistake. So let's sort out the if I had gone back to Rome bit first. So I believe that if I had gone back to Rome, so that's quite obviously pluperfect. So si Romam. Let's use the deponent regredior. So we go regressus. I'm just going to assume this person is a man. And then the pluperfect subjunctive sm. Okay, because remember the pluperfect subjunctive of a deponent verb is the PAP plus the imperfect subjunctive of some. So si Romam regressus sm, I would have made a mistake. Erratorum fuisse. So remember, this is still a closed condition, which is why you need that weird periphrastic infinitive, because the suggestion in that sentence is that this person did not go back to Rome. Finally, number 5, the general said that he would have punished the soldiers if they had run away. So Imperator Dixit said that he, so we need to use say again, if they had run away, si fugissent, pluperfect, because it's had. Obviously, I know I keep saying that rule doesn't follow, but if you're given a had in the English, it's obviously pluperfect in the Latin. Milites, and then it is remote, sorry, it is closed because the suggestion is that these soldiers haven't run away. So punitorum fuisse. Okay, so there are all your notes on the closed or remote conditionals within the indirect statement. Your job is now exercise 326 on page 92 and 328 on page 94. Keep watching this video. If things don't make sense, look at the notes on those pages and hopefully it will start to click into place.